it's Combine Week. A lot of people are like, so you're getting ready to run? And I'm like, no, I run now later in the spring because of COVID. We couldn't do it one year, and I wanted to keep running. So we did it at a SoFi. Now we're doing it at the Rose Bowl again. And but, I tell the story all the time about the run, how it was born out of being bored one time, and I did it, and I ran. I had no idea NFL Network put the cameras on me, and then they showed it, and they surprised me with it. And then the next year, Mike Holmgren's like, you're going to run again? I'm like, why? And he goes, you got to beat your time. And I'm like, okay. He's not wrong, so I had to do it over and over again. There was one time where I almost didn't do it. I don't talk about that much, is that one time because I ran it, and it was terrible. And I just keep thinking to myself, Dion's going to be disappointed and Susie's going to be disappointed. Let me run it again. And I did. Let me run it a third time. And I ran it a third time, and my hamstring popped. It was bad. And I'm like, well, I guess we're not going to air this. And a certain individual said, you got to run it. Because you got to put it on the air because this makes you seem like you're just like everybody else. That man's name is Mike Mayock. Put him up on the screen right here. Remember that, Mike? You told me how to run, how to put on television. Remember that, Mike? You told me that? Remember that?
You know what, Rich? There's a certain amount of humanity, a certain amount of humility. And ultimately, I think that came through. And it just continued to push what started as a fun thing. And now because of you and how you can push that out there and how the network's been great with it, it's also become one of the biggest fundraisers that I've ever seen from a grassroots beginning. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And you were always part of it. I remember you were the timer, and you'd hit the time, and I'd come to you, and I'd be just like, oh, God, whatever. And then you'd have this poker face, and then sometimes you just would shake your Other times you just held it up, like you just let the number speak for himself.
I'll tell you, the funniest one, though, was the one you just described, because you were like, this is over. I'm like, dude, this is you at your most humble. This has to get pushed out there.
I know. You said that. Mike Mayock here, our radio audience, just rejoined and talking about the time where I pulled a hamstring recording the 40, and you're like, you got to run that. You got to put it on the air. It just shows you're human, like you're trying, like everybody's fine. And you spoke so eloquently on it. I'm like, okay, put it on the air. Then we run it. We put it on the air. You know what Mike says? Oh, must have been a sniper in the dome.
You know what
put it on the air, and then you trolled me when it finally got on the air.
I said it was Bill Polian, who was the GM of the Colts at that point, up there with a sniper rifle.
Oh, must have been a sniper in the dome. And I'm like, I was thinking to myself, you SOB, you told me to run it. Just
we're going to have some fun with it. We're going to have some fun with it, brother.
Oh, my gosh. Awesome. Mike Mayock back here on the program. Combine Week, top of Combine Week. What was the first Combine you ever attended, Mike? Was it your own? Did you ever go to the Combine as a player back in the day?
No, they didn't have a Combine when I played. That's how old I am. The first one I went to was just me and Paul Burmeister in the old RCA Dome, and they only sent the two of us.
Right.
And Worm. I think Worm was there.
Worm.
And
yes, the Worm. And you were like in just like folding chairs, right? On the 50-yard line, just calling it, on the network.
And the thing I remember was the first day's O-line day, and we were standing right down there by the 50 and kind of leaning over, and there was an offensive line drill going on with coaches.
Yeah.
And Paul had me go through my top 5 guys, and I got to the 5th guy, and I said, there's not enough sand in the pants, and, I think he's probably more of a 3rd or 4th round guy. And you hear very clearly on air, hey, Mayock, F you. Kid heard me and didn't like it. That was the first Combine.
Oh, my God. The evaluator getting evaluated in a very blue way on the spot. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, and then you and Paul kicked things off, and then I would show up eventually for NFL Total Access, and then you and I would spend all those hours together in the booth of the old RCA Dome, and then Lucas Oil as well. And so I guess the most important part of the week, right, is the medical still, even to this day, would you say, Mike, or the interviews at night, or what would you say
I
is?
would say the medical is still critical. I mean, you can look at the medical really, everybody has a feel for what guys got hurt. Like there are two or three high-level corners this year. The kid from Notre Dame, Ben Morrison, the Ravel kid from Carolina, who's really intriguing. He tore his ACL in practice in September. Will Johnson from Michigan. All three of those guys are potential first-round picks with major medical concerns from injuries this past year. So even though they might not be working out, for GMs and coaches, those are big deals. And, we talk about the interviews at night. They're important also, but they kind of set the table for how you want to do your 30 interviews later. And I think the clear one misconception up, Rich, is a lot of people in the media call it a top 30 interview. Like it's your top 30. You only get what the 30 interview is every team in the league gets 32 interviews in their facility between the end of the combine and the beginning of the draft. And it can last all day. You can't work them out, but they can spend the whole day in your building. And the way a lot of teams do it, which I think is fascinating, is you might get 4, 5, 6 of your top level guys in there you still have questions about. You may get another group of guys filtered throughout the draft, but you're a little worried about the mental, and you want to put them with your offensive line coach and have that guy cram 2 hours of information down his throat, give him some lunch, and bring him back in and see if he can regurgitate it. Not the lunch, but the information. Yes. So then there's the on-field, the underwear Olympics, which is what captures everybody's attention. But there's so much more going on than just that. And it really is about information gathering.
Well, Shedeur Sanders isn't going to work out apparently, and neither will Cam Ward. How does that sit? Like, what's the reaction to that, or is it now so old hat that the top quarterbacks? Ashton Genty also saying, according to everybody, that he's not going to work out on the field. See you at the pro days. How does that all sit in the evaluation, Mike?
Well, years ago, the reason they let me and you in the front door was because they wanted a higher percentage of competitors.
Right.
And they felt like if the kids saw it was on television, that more kids would compete. And we got a big bump for a lot of years. More and more kids were competing. And what I used to tell kids all the time, and this is from my football heart and brain, not from my TV heart and brain, they would ask me, should I run? And I'd say, why wouldn't you want 2 bites at the apple? If you run poorly at the combine, you get another shot at your pro day, and they're going to take the best time. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. But I think the last couple of years, more and more, like a lot of the top level quarterbacks say, I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to throw to my own wideouts. And that's fine. Most of the top guys last year did. It doesn't really affect their grades. You're going to get a good look at the quarterbacks at their pro days. As long as they throw, Rich, I don't think it matters much anymore.
Throw just at some point, not just at the combine, just at some point you eyeball them, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important at the pro day. They're going to put their best foot forward because Shedeur will have his own personal coach there, his own receivers. They'll work on a script. It might be 50 to 70 pass plays. Same with Cam Ward. He'll have his own people there. He'll feel very comfortable. They'll have coaches from different teams coming in to work them out wherever they're working out and living. When I was with the Raiders, we did a couple of clandestine workouts my first year there with Kyler Murray and a couple other guys. And of course, I think after we worked out Kyler Murray, we were trying to keep it quiet. Coach Gruden went into the shop at the airport on the way in, and he bought all these Oakland Athletic hats because that's who Kyler Murray was owned by in baseball. And he got Kyler to sign all the hats, and we're wearing them out of the workout like we're really clandestine on the way to the airport wearing Oakland Athletic hats autographed by Kyler Murray.
So why would you, kick the tires on Murray? Would you have traded up? Is that what you were? Because again, this is all part of evaluation and figuring out whether it's worth spending whatever capital you'd need to spend to get up to go get a guy. I mean, is that why you did that back in the day with Kyler?
We had the
Mike?
4th overall pick that first year.
Right.
And I thought it was really important because Coach Gruden is such a quarterback guy. Okay. And Kyler was a little bit of a conversation because of the height, the play style. I thought it was really important because who knows, he could have slid to 4. Coach could have fallen in love with him when we would have tried to move up. Who knows? But I thought it was really, really important that Coach and Greg Olson, our offensive coordinator, got an opportunity to watch him throw the football with just us there. So that John, and I'll tell you what, John was great in those situations. He had him up in the hotel room. We met him in his hotel room, and John had him barking out signals in the Marriott in his hotel room, and yelling at the kid for not being loud enough because we're in. And now he's barking, and John would have some footballs had laces, other footballs didn't have laces. And he wouldn't tell the kid which one. It was he'd flip it to him and expect him to get the ball out of his hands quickly with or without the laces. So there's all these little things that I think are kind of cool that fans never really get a chance to hear about.
Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. The Titans, walk me through what their decision's going to be walking into the combine this week. Mike?
Yeah, I think, Rich, first and foremost, and it's the same thing for Cleveland from an exercise perspective at number 2, is you got to evaluate those 2 quarterbacks. Because by definition, you can have one of them if you fall in love with them, right? So if you think Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is your quarterback, your guy of the future, you got to go get one. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a franchise quarterback, you're just another day closer to getting fired. So that's what's going to drive their initial evaluation is those 2 kids. Now, if they don't believe they're the long-term answer, then the next level is, okay, is it Abdul Carter or is it the Travis Hunter? They're probably the next 2, and they're both difference makers for different reasons, and both very capable of going 1 or 2. And then the third option is you got to be open for business. I think both teams, you've got to be wide open for business, because if that quarterback evaluation is either bad or has you sitting on the fence, you've got to know prior to draft day whether or not you'll move down. You can move down now, you can move down later, but how far down do you want to go? Where do you think that next gap is? So there's an awful lot of evaluations, and it's too early for, I'm sure, for Borgonzi in Tennessee or Andrew Berry in Cleveland to have made any decisions. But first and foremost, you got to know if you fall in love with one or both of those quarterbacks.
Well, and obviously there's a moving part that says I want to be moved, and Cleveland says, as of right now, no chance. I mean, the Titans don't have a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer raising his hand saying I want out of here like the Browns have with Myles Garrett. How do you think that all plays into this week for Andrew Berry? Mike?
Well, we know what Cleveland is saying right now.
Yep.
They're 2 years removed from being 11-5 with Joe Flacco at quarterback. I think they feel like they want to compete. They get 9 draft picks this year for the first time since 21, a first-round draft pick because of that awful Deshaun Watson trade. So, look, that defensive end is probably the best player, and it might be the best defensive player in the league. He's 29 years old. He's got 3 or 4 more big years in him, I believe. So I think they have to be open for business on him also. And I think you're saying the right things. We're not going to move him, but I think you got to listen to people, because I think it starts with 2 first-round draft picks plus maybe another draft pick or 2, maybe an existing good football player on the other team. But I think you got to be open for business. And at a certain point, you got to be honest with yourself. How good are we going to be? And what is the answer at quarterback? Are we going to have one of those, 37-year-old bridge quarterbacks? Are we going to draft a rookie? Are we going to do both? But can we compete this year? And what can Myles Garrett get us on the open market?
And in terms of that, right? I mean, if you think Abdul Carter is that great and he's available in this draft for you, and Myles wants out, and you just mentioned how many draft choices they already have, and how significant it is because of, as you referred to it, and rightfully so, awful Deshaun Watson trade. You just mentioned a killing that you can get for him, and you, having drafted the Condor, know how difficult it is to find a difference maker of the first variety at this position. What would you give up for Garrett? Would you give up what you just said you think you would ask for if you were the GM selling? Would you give that up for Garrett?
Well, pick a team that needs a DN like Detroit. You got Aiden Hutchinson on one side. You've got one of the better rosters in football. You draft extremely well. But you got this dude sitting out there in Cleveland. Would you give up a couple first-round picks and a player or two?
Heck yeah.
And bring in a 29-year-old Myles Garrett and pair him with Aiden Hutchinson?
Heck yeah.
I'd be really interested in that on both sides of that particular equation.
What about Washington, right? What about Washington? Yeah. Even though they're plus you're naming two teams that are really down on that first round. I mean, if you're Cleveland, wouldn't you want to try and send Garrett to somebody way higher up on the first round food chain? Wouldn't that be part of your equation too? Do you think
if I was
about
Cleveland, I'd be thinking a couple things. One, I would try to backload this deal a little bit, because if I need to get a quarterback and I'm not interested in one of the two this year, there's potentially a much deeper quarterback class next year. So maybe I'm trying to back end some of those draft picks would give me ammunition to move up next year and get my guy. But yeah, I mean, I'd also like him to go to the NFC, to be really honest with you, Rich. And there's so many different parts of this conversation. Of course, you'd like to move up in the first round, but I think you're looking team by team, and you've got a little bit of a different compensation coming in from all of them, depending on what they're, where they're picking. Getting the 3rd overall pick versus getting the 28th overall pick is a big deal. So for sure, all that comes into the equation under value and what you'll accept or not accept.
Before I let you go, Mike, I want to spend our final few minutes on Stafford here, because I really want to pick your brain here. Albert Breer in hour 2 mentioned that his reporting is that Les Snead and the Rams told Stafford and his representatives that they have a right, go ahead and talk to other teams and find out what your value is. He said that they were given that permission during Super Bowl week. So it's been a couple weeks now. And you know what the combine's like. Everybody runs into each other at the Starbucks, right? Or, hey, look at you here in this restaurant where I had no idea you were here. That's the way this stuff works here. So what do you make of the Rams giving permission to maybe find a partner, or to keep Stafford so he knows what his value is and they come up with a better number? And why would another team even give a number, knowing that the Rams might just take that number and keep Stafford? Well, what's your opinion of all this, Mike?
I think it's a fascinating conversation. And ultimately, I don't think a divorce makes any sense for either party. I think the Boston College word that I remember that defines that is symbiotic. Both sides need the other party to continue to live. From the Rams side, they've got a really good young roster. They competed against the Eagles in the playoffs, took them deep. Why would you not want to compete with Matthew Stafford for the next 2 or 3 years? Because in addition to chasing another Super Bowl, which I think they can, and you and I both know Les Snead and think an awful lot about him. Mm-hmm. Les has really drafted well since they traded for Matthew and haven't had any first-round picks till last year. I mean, Les has done a great job. They're going to get better and better over the next couple of years. So from a Rams perspective, not only do you compete for the next 2 or 3 years, but you get an opportunity to figure out who's next at quarterback. Take a couple swings at that. Get somebody in the building to groom. And from Stafford's perspective, why would you want to leave except for money? You've got one of the best play callers in the league in Sean McVay. They draft well. They've got $45 million of cap space available. They can take care of him and a couple of free agents. Where do you want to go? You want to go to Pittsburgh? I don't think Pittsburgh's roster is better. I think the Rams have a better roster. Do you want to go to the Giants and try and be a savior? I think that's a 2, 3, 4 year proposition there. I mean, do you want to end your career on a bad team? And the same thing with Vegas. They've got Pete Carroll. They got $100 million in cap. I think they're going to get better in Vegas, but do you want to be part of a rebuild in either situation? So I kind of look at this, Rich, and I go, okay, I put my general manager's cap on and go, what's the fair market deal to make both parties happy for a 37-year-old quarterback? And if you kind of look at it, he's not a top 7 or 8 quarterback anymore. He might be number 10, he might be number 12, whatever, but he's 37 years. Look at last year. Kirk Cousins was 37 years old. Derek Carr was 34. Aaron Rodgers, 41. Geno Smith, 35. None of them had a good year, either through injury or poor play. So why do you want to go out and pay a 37-year-old guy top dollar? I like what he did last year. I think there's some gas in the tank, but there's got to be a happy place for both parties. And maybe what it is, Rich, because he's out of guaranteed money. Then he's got 2 years left on his contract. He's below market, and he's out of guaranteed money except for $4 million that's coming in the door next month. So maybe you're guaranteeing 2 years of contract money and bumping him some kind of bonus that then you can diffuse over the next 2 or 3 years. And it only affects your cap a couple million, $3 million. So to me, with the GM cap on, I don't want to let him out the door. And I think I want to make him happy and give him a fair market deal. But his side has to be aware he's a 37-year-old quarterback. And let's understand what that's looked like, except for Tom Brady over the last several years in the NFL.
Well, then in the minute I have left, keep your GM cap on, not for being Les Snead, but for the one that Stafford's agent reaches out to. I mean, and you would love to have him, but you also know you give him a number, you're just maybe potentially helping out the Rams and him come together, right? Or do you look at it, say, you never know? How do you handle the visit from a Stafford representative if you're that GM, Mike?
Never up, never in. I mean, if there's an opportunity to look at this deal and I'm the Giants, I'm looking at it. I've got cap money available. I've got draft. I'm not giving up the 3rd pick. But the Aaron Rodgers trade 2 years ago was for a 39-year-old quarterback. Effectively, it was 2 second-round picks. Okay? And there was a swap of ones and a swap later on that went the other way in the 5th and 6th round. But effectively, it was 2 second-round picks. So if I'm the Giants and I'm going, would I give up 2 second-round picks to get a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford? I might, especially, Rich, and this is a real thing, especially if the GM and the head coach are feeling some pressure to win now.
Which I do believe they are. Not to make light of it, but Mike, you the man. Great as always. We'll chat again next week. DJ and I will give you multiple shout-outs over the next few days. That is for sure on NFL Network.
Thanks, brother. Say hi to DJ.
You bet. That's the one and only Mike Mayock right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Just great stuff. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.